Hello there, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Lisa Solomon, and I'm a senior manager with Common Sense, a nonprofit that we can't believe it will soon celebrate its 20th birthday. As part of my work, I get to collaborate with schools all across the country, and we are so very, very grateful for the support and partnership of the many school communities joining us for this session today, and thankful for the support of all the nonprofit work that we do for all. Our goal in this session today is to help you support your kids as they start to interact with media and technology. It's always my pledge that you will come away with at least 2 to 3 tips you can actually try today. But I do also add my caveat that I learned the hard way with my now teenagers that after this webinar, please don't go and just brain dump everything all at once on your kids or your partner. Maybe parse it out in small, bite-sizable, teachable moments. Otherwise, our kids definitely will tune us out. And also, please don't be hard on yourself. There is so much time, and do-overs are okay in parenting. Before we jump in, I want to just share a few housekeeping items. This session, Training Wheels for Tech, will run about 50 minutes, and we will do our very best to answer questions along the way. But please know that our team has read all of the many great questions submitted to us ahead of time, and they've been threaded into the upcoming conversation. If you are joining us live, I encourage you to pop comments and new questions into the chat. We will be monitoring those in real time. And our team will also add useful resources in the chat, so keep an eye on that as well. We will be recording this session and we will post it shortly on our YouTube channel. I am now going to hand you over to our moderator for today's program, my friend and colleague, Laura Ordoñez. She is Common Sense's head of podcast and YouTube ratings and reviews. Laura spearheaded the development and launch of the first of its kind and one of my favorite resources on the site, comprehensive podcast ratings and reviews channel. It's all grounded in child development principles and research. She then expanded her role leading the effort to create YouTube ratings and reviews to help families navigate the popular video platform. So she is the perfect person to lead us through today's discussion, Training Wheels for Tech. Laura, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Lisa. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone taking the time out to be here today. So today we're really talking about how to establish training wheels for technology use in our households. So just like riding a bike, it can feel scary, uncertain, and even dangerous when we first introduce technology into our kids' lives. So our goal is really to give you these tech training wheels to make navigating this inevitable journey a bit easier and less overwhelming for you and your family. Now, if you're like me, maybe you're thinking, I've actually already got a plan for technology use in my household. It's just to avoid it. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, in today's day and age, that's next to impossible. As we've seen throughout the years, and especially during and after the pandemic, technology is now a crucial and essential part of our kids' lives. But what's great is that while kids are young, we have the opportunity to frame how they use it, and even more importantly, how they think about it. And I just want to let you know that as a parent of a 14-year-old, I know how scary and kind of overwhelming this topic can be, but I always like to say that we tend to fear what we don't know. So today we're going to give you that knowledge. We're going to put you in the know and give you some tools needed to feel confident in gradually releasing your kids into the tech and media landscape. Now, at Common Sense, we spend a lot of time and energy creating resources to help families navigate the tech and media world, like how to use parental controls and how to establish agreements for device use. So we'll be sharing those links and these resources in the chat during today's discussion. But let's keep in mind that keeping our kids safe in the digital world requires more than just setting parental controls. It's not really a set it and forget it type of ordeal, right? So what we'll do today is we'll have a more expansive conversation about the larger framework of how to really see media and technology fitting into your family's life. All of us here, I'm sure, have different family dynamics, right? Different traditions, different habits in our households, different ways we choose to spend time together as a family. So the way that we include these practical tips and rules around media and technology will most likely look a little bit different for each one of us. but the underlying concepts and frameworks will all generally be the same. It's just how we use them with our household, in our household, and with our kids that may vary. But I know this seems like a lot, but luckily we have some amazing speakers and experts here today to help us guide the discussion. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our speakers for today. So first up, we have Dr. Aliza Pressman. Dr. Pressman is an assistant clinical professor at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in the Department of Pediatrics. She's the co-founding director of the nonprofit Mount Sinai Parenting Center and Seedlings Group. And she's the host of one of my favorite podcasts, Raising Good Humans. We've asked Dr. Aliza to join us today to talk about setting guidelines and rules around tech and media use, and also helping to build skills necessary to manage tech and media use with our kids. Now, as I mentioned, we all have different family dynamics and different age kids. So Dr. Aliza, thank you so much for being here. And can you just tell us a little something about your family? Oh, I think you're muted.
You know, we talked about this.
No worries.
This is my first time on screen. So I have two daughters who are teenagers. So I'm really in the middle of this, 13 and almost 16. So I very much, well, fascinated by the research, and I'm a developmental psychologist. Nothing that makes me more excited intellectually than thinking about change and growth over time and how we come to be who we are. Having teenagers and having the world of screens and in particular social media, it's a wild ride. So I think that allows me to do something that is a theater geek thing I say, which is take things from page to stage, but really thinking about the realities of being a parent of kids in this world right now, with the research that we have so that we can help support them in the best ways possible.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for being here. So, and also we have Avriel Epps-Darling, who is a computational social scientist and PhD candidate in human development at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She has an MS in data science from Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, is a presidential scholar, and a Ford Foundation pre-doctoral fellow. Her doctoral research focuses on how adolescent racial and gender identity development is influenced by bias in digital products. Her work illuminates the impact of algorithm design and computer-mediated social expectations communicated through personalized recommendation systems and information filters on youth's beliefs and behavior. Avriel can hopefully help us feel empowered about the tech that we sometimes really don't understand. And she'll also be able to explain how algorithms work and talk to us about how they impact the development of a child's sense of self, which is really exciting because I know the whole algorithm thing it's like a different language. So thank you so much for being here, Avriel. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about this. I am the mother of a 4-year-old who has been sitting on his uncle's lap pretending to code since he came out the womb. He's very, very interested in every device that exists in our household. And so it's been really fun and interesting to try to figure out how to help him build a healthy relationship with them all.
Thank you so much for being here today, Avriel. Thank you both for being here. And I'm excited not only because of your expertise, but we all have different backgrounds as far as parenting and our kids' ages. So let's just get into it. My first question is for you, Aliza. I'm guessing that in your practice and definitely on the podcast, you get a lot of questions or see a lot of issues arising around tech and parenting. So what would you say are the building blocks when it comes to creating a framework of how to approach technology with our kids?
Well, the most important thing, and this is kind of with every topic that comes up, is cultivating a connected relationship with your child so that they can have the safety and space to build the skills necessary to navigate this very complicated system of being a developing person while learning how to use technology. Because our developing brain, which takes, I won't go too far into this, but I think the underlying skills that enable us to navigate social media and screens and video games and all of it, it's really important to have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, which you can't have until you are somewhere between 18 and 27 years old, give or take. And so because your executive function skills are housed in this part of the brain that isn't fully developed, you're getting access to things when you're kind of all gas, no brakes. And so what's most important is to have a connected relationship with your child so that they can come to you when they have experiences on screens that are making them feel problematic in some way, or where they're noticing something that they shouldn't have seen, or they kind of know it makes them feel uncomfortable. And then being able to help build those skills that promote all those, the executive function based capacities like self-regulation and impulse control and empathy and all of those things that come into play with making good choices.
Yeah, so it seems like there's a lot of that social emotional learning that is also happening while they're in depth in in technology, right? And learning, kind of understanding where they're at those stages.
And what's great is that those are skills that are buildable. You're not going to rush your kid's prefrontal cortex into growing bigger, stronger, faster, but you can really, if you think of it like weightlifting, you're just like doing exercises to build those muscles so that they're better able to navigate those systems. And you can start those as early as toddlerhood. Actually, you can start it out of the womb, and then grow from there. And we can certainly talk about those.
Great. Thank you. And Avriel, I wanted to ask you, can you lay out some basic concepts about the way that technology works, not just for us, but on us, right? So some basic concepts that parents can maybe start to explain to their kids in order for them to feel empowered about the role of media and technology in their lives.
Yeah, for sure. We've already mentioned the term algorithm, so I'll just briefly unpack that. An algorithm is basically like a recipe, a set of instructions that is given to a computer and told to tell it what to do. And excuse me, I'm a little under the weather today. But one of the things that I think it's important to understand is that algorithms work in concert with one another. There's many algorithms that work to power a website. And when we're talking about social media or these popular platforms that youth are on, they mostly run on something called the attention economy, which is the idea that the thing that is most valuable, because we're not paying to be on these sites, it's free for us to access the sites, but what we are paying with is our attention, our eyeballs, because advertisers pay the platforms money in order to get in front of our faces and get in front of our children's faces, and have them have whatever experience it is that the advertiser and the platform owner want the user to have. Now, that's not to say that we lack any agency and that we're just passive consumers of these technological tools. In fact, I think we all realize that technology, particularly machine learning, artificial intelligence, the type of technology, the type of algorithms that power social media feeds are tools. They help us find information as well as helping advertisers get in front of us to sell us things. And so we have to understand that, just like a pencil can be used to write a love poem or hate speech, a line of code can be used to, bolster the development of an individual child, and can also be used to send them down a really, really dark path. And so we want to think of technology as not this scary thing that's going to take over the world, but as a set of tools, or a tool in and of itself, that can allow us to accomplish many goals.
I love this. And I just want to point out that from what both of you have said is that we can actually start talking to our kids about the information that both of you are giving, so they have that information going into it. Obviously, it will sound different at different ages, but I think even knowing, as you said, Avriel, we're not passive consumers. I think that sometimes with kids, they're just getting into it, and they feel like maybe a passive consumer in their own life as the child of the family, but can be empowered in the space of technology, and knowing that they have the power to say, no, I'm not going to use this way, or I know how this is being used on me, right? So I love that you're both bringing this up, and I would say that to anyone watching, this is what we're learning today. We're all learning, really. It's really exciting. We can talk to our kids about this, but of course, none of this is easy. It can feel like a lot. So this next question is for both of you. What are some of the harder things about doing this? Like all of these tools that we're learning, or the framework, what can be kind of like the hardest part about that from the parent's perspective, and how can we navigate that? So Aliza, I'll start with you on that question.
So I think there are two things that are the extra challenging things from the parent's perspective. One is that, well, three things actually. One is that we're not natives here. So we don't have as much understanding of tech as our kids will and do. And we need to try to get some fluency, but it's never going to be something that we totally understand. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we know that the most important thing in our children's sort of as a protective factor for kids, the most powerful environmental factor that protects kids throughout life and influences kids, is having one close, sensitive, connected relationship with a grown-up, preferably a parent. So if we know that that is so powerful, and it's a good thing not to stress anybody out, it's more like, oh, there's only one thing I can control, and it's me. So how wonderful that that actually has an influence on my child's development. That we sometimes get afraid of setting limits because we can't distinguish between being close and connected and also saying, hey, this is going to maybe be a challenge for you, but I'm putting guardrails up. And watching our kids get frustrated and upset and feel angry or left out is painful. And so being able to balance being sensitive and addressing their immediate needs that are, important, appropriate, immediate needs, not necessarily wants, and being able to say, right now we're not ready for this, or I'm not ready for this, because you need a lot of bandwidth as a parent to be ready for all of it. And I think the third thing that comes up that's very challenging is that the developing brain is kind of calibrating and trying to understand how to make meaning in the world. And more technology allows for that. And as Avriel beautifully said, like the different uses of a pencil, it's not this like all bad thing that we just reject completely, but helping them understand how best to use this is important, but a challenge when they also need to, as they get older and older, connect with peers and be part of the broader community. And they're wired to need to do that. So getting rejected from that is actually really stressful. And being able to help them calibrate what's an appropriate behavior or response and have empathy during that very tricky time, while they are putting themselves at risk for being rejected by their wider community, for not doing something that feels like it's not the right move, but it's going to keep them away from the people that need to accept them. That might seem really minor to us, but it's a really big deal to a developing brain. We're wired to survive, and we survive through that group and through being able to grow further and further into having that community. So these are the three challenges that I see the most as parents, and they are not easy, but we can do things about it, which I find quite heartening.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. And Avriel, what do you think from your perspective is the biggest challenge from the parents' perspective?
Yeah. I would say that there's probably two, but the most salient thing for me is the challenges of role modeling technology use. These tools are really good at grabbing our attention and keeping us on them. And they hack our psychology in a sense to do that. And, I know as a mom myself, it's really hard to stay present with my child and be off of my devices. And that itself is showing, modeling a relationship with technology for my son. And so I think it's really important to just, and difficult to stay mindful of how we are relating to our own devices, and knowing that our kids are sponges and they're going to relate to their devices in similar ways. And it's important to be mindful of that. And another thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is the idea that we ourselves are consumers and are living on these platforms, but our experiences on the platforms as having fully developed adult brains are very different. And so the way that the information that we consume and the content that we consume shapes our psychology, shapes our neurobiological processes, is slightly different than it shapes adolescence, which is slightly different than it shapes early children. And so just to keep in mind that developmental stage and age is important in this realm too, as we'll continue to talk about.
Yeah, great. I love that concept of role modeling. It brought up, I think we all kind of think, okay, we're the parent, we're doing this, here's our child. And sometimes like there's the concept of, oh, our child is just like a mini adult. And they're not, as you've both mentioned, right? They're going through a totally different developmental process and they take things in totally differently. But I always remember this moment. We were out at dinner. I was out at dinner with my son and I picked up my phone just to answer a text or something. And I looked over at him and I was like, oh, get off your phone. And he's like, you get off your phone. I'm like, fair enough. So I think, yeah, that modeling and allowing them to like maybe even call you out on it a little bit, and we can call each other out and help each other together. And I think that's a great concept that both of you are talking about, is that communication, right, together. And Dr. Aliza, I wanted to ask you, what do you think are kind of some more detrimental traps when it comes to things like social media? I know that, once kids get a device, or even if they're just on, the computer, they kind of have this access to social media that's really not as easy to gatekeep. So what are some of those detrimental traps of social media, and what are maybe some talking points for parents about these issues?
Well, because the modeling thing is a big deal that you both mentioned, one of the biggest traps is putting our kids on our social media, and engaging them in our social media and sharing with them how well received it was or how many likes we got. So now I'm talking about younger kids who wouldn't have necessarily access on their own, but now we've made it part of the water in the household. Now, if you want to do that, I so get it. And it's fun, but keep in mind that you're making a value judgment of this is a great thing and something to look forward to. And fun. And I'm not saying that you can't connect over doing those kinds of things, but you really want to make sure that you ask permission to post your child or talk to your child about it, so that when they become an age where it's appropriate for them, or you decide that it's appropriate for them to do that, that they're not going to post things without other people's permission, or that they're not going to focus on the inevitable feedback that they're getting. And then the other huge problem, I would say, with social media while you've got a developing brain is that feedback, those dopamine hits, whether it's good or bad, what's happening, it can really wire you at a time when you're just growing and you're just integrating your brain. And you need more and more of that feedback at a time when you don't have the self-regulation capacity to say, ooh, this is too much. So it's like going to, do anything before you have the full muscles to do it. You're going to go too far and then injure yourself. So those kinds of things are easy for us to, I guess control is not my favorite word, but those are things that we can put guardrails up about in the earlier years. And I would also say that if you can try to not necessarily associate having social media with having devices. So let's say you decide, I am going to get an iPad for my child, or I am going to get them a phone. It means they will have access. So you're making a decision that there's a risk there that they're going to have access. So you need to teach them about it and all of those things. And you don't want to go so far where you're like, it's all evil. You're never going to be doing this. We're waiting so many years. And even if every single person you know has it, you're not touching this stuff, because they're going to be able to do it behind your back. I mean, I have a teenager whose friend asked her to keep her social media on her phone. She's 16 years old. And my daughter happened to tell me about this. Certainly hope nobody's watching this and going to ask me, but she didn't do it for her, but somebody did it for her. So she has all of these things anyway. She found a way around it. So if the guardrails are unrealistic and they're not part of a conversation, the kids can work their way around it. So you're much better off just having realistic conversations and growing their freedoms over time along with their brain development, with the understanding that having your own social media where people respond to it and you get feedback is even more problematic than looking at social media of others, because that's like, you're scrolling through Pinterest and you're seeing TikToks that are copied onto Pinterest, and you're getting information there, you're seeing things, but it's not as personal. I'm not saying that's so wonderful. At younger ages, it's certainly not, but it's still not giving you dopamine hits of likes and experiences that make you want more and more and more. So I think that imagining that once your kids have access, they have access to everything, and you should just say like, well, that ship sailed, is very problematic. You want to say like, we're going to do a little bit of access. We're going to talk about this. And if you can, if this is important to you, really take inventory about how you are navigating social media in your own life, because that's you can talk all you want with kids. You can lecture, you can do that. But the reality is that they're watching and they're learning and they're observing, and they also have things coming at them while their brain is calibrating, figuring out how they feel about things, figuring out how they want to do things. And if what's coming at them is inconsistent if your behavior is inconsistent with what you're saying, and all this temptation is coming at them, it's not going to be very effective. And I don't love thinking about threats and danger in all of this, because it only sets us all up to be so stressed out about it that we shut down and we're like, no, I can't even deal with this. And we can't learn, and we certainly can't expect our kids to learn. But I would say paying attention and figuring out with them what feels comfortable, and really getting an understanding about what's happening with their friends will help you, so that this happens slowly, so you can grow muscles instead of just ending up giving up and saying, I do this, they do this, this is an inevitable. And that should moderate. Like, it does help a little. Everything can be a part of this, support system. And I'm going to let Avriel, get into the technical stuff, because I'm so much further away from it in terms of understanding what happens in these algorithms and all of those systems.
Yeah, and I love that because that was a great perspective from where they're coming developmentally and emotionally, and how we're integrating those conversations and having to kind of look in the mirror, right? And ask ourselves, why are we on social media? So that when we ask our children the same question, why do they want to be? We can kind of have that discussion that makes sense together. But yes, Avriel, I think that one thing that is so scary for parents, I know for me, is like, I don't understand these algorithms, right? Like, it seems like they're always changing. So I'd love you to just maybe talk a little bit about these, the harmful issues with algorithms and implicit biases, and how these can kind of work within social media platforms, especially like a YouTube or a TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing to keep in mind is that algorithms are created by human beings, and they, at their core, it's a bunch of math, but math is not a neutral language. And the biases, the societal biases, the racism, the homophobia, the sexism, the heteronormativity, et cetera, all get coded into the platforms, especially, or I wouldn't say especially, I mean specifically, when we are talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so I'll quickly explain the most common form of machine learning model that's used on social media platforms, or the one that we're interacting with the most, is something called a recommendation algorithm or a recommendation system, meaning a computer system or a set of algorithms, recipes, like I said earlier, that are determining second by second, millisecond by millisecond, what it thinks we want to see, or what it thinks will achieve its primary goal, which is to keep us on the platform longer and interact with more ads, and feeding that content to the user. And recommending that content to the user. Sometimes the machine learning algorithm gets it right, and we are really interested, and we double heart it, or we, sit and watch the TikTok in its entirety. Sometimes it gets it wrong, and we swipe through. And with every one of those interactions, we create more data, more information for the system to make better predictions about what we're going to want to watch or not want to watch in the future. This is really important to understand, because recommendation algorithms are a force of socialization. As you can imagine, what we used to see on TV and hear on the radio and read in books, gave us a framework for thinking about who we are in the world, and what the possibilities for us are in our lifetime. Like, you see a story in a movie, and your brain immediately starts to think, well, do I identify with that? Is that possible for me? Is it not? Why? And so all of the content that we're fed through recommendation algorithms is also doing that for us. It's giving us identity materials, frameworks, concepts to help us make sense of who we are in the world and what's possible for us. And for a developing child, that's really, really important, because especially in early adolescence, mid-adolescence, but throughout childhood, human beings are in the process of figuring out who they are. And, that it can be in terms of what it is that we're good at. If we're a STEM student, or a liberal arts student, or it could also mean what it means to be a Black person, what it means to be queer, what it means to be an English language learner. Like, all of these messages are coming to us through recommendation algorithms. And I think what's specific and interesting about or different about social media in comparison to media of the past, like say TV and movies, TV and film, is that recommendation algorithms are able to funnel us into more and more narrow conceptions of what is possible for us, what our identities should be, because they're so hyper personalized, and because they feed off of and reinvent themselves moment by moment through our interactions with them.
Thank you. That was really helpful for me. I'm sure it was helpful for everyone else out there because, how do we teach our kids about something that we don't necessarily understand ourselves? But that was a great way to kind of conceptualize it from things that we knew growing up to what our kids are now having, right? Which it just translates. But I want to talk about the big culprits because these are the two really big places that kids are right now. And, this is obviously probably going to change in the next 5 to 10 years. It all changes, right? But right now, YouTube and TikTok is where the kids live. I know that with my son, he was on YouTube before I even knew he was on YouTube. And it was so scary because I was like, I don't understand this place. And the only reason I really understand it now is because I lead our YouTube channel. And so I had to understand it, but I know that all parents can't take the time to do research on it. So let's just talk a little bit about YouTube a little bit, right? So what are some maybe common practices that parents can take away of understanding YouTube and how it's helpful and harmful to, or maybe problematic to kids, and how their kids can navigate it and how they can navigate it with their kids? So Aliza, do you want to start us off on that one?
I'm actually going to, I'll say a little bit just about the developmental response as you're getting access to these things, but then I'm going to send that right over to Avriel because what I would say is, from a developmental perspective, what you want to do is be confident in your guardrails. Make sure that you're using these earlier experiences with YouTube, for example. They're not just, don't leave your kids. And I know this is like a really annoying thing to say as a mom. I understand this is annoying, but it should be interactive with you. If you can join your kids in the experience, you can manage what's helping them translate what's happening in their bodies, what they're feeling, whether they're getting flushed because something was silly and exciting, or whether their stomach is feeling a certain way, and let them notice what they're watching. Make it fun, engage, and then get rid of it, because it's not something to keep, watching over and over and over. You can get so sucked in. So if you keep those guardrails up where you're present and you're not just like, this is my babysitter right now. If you're going to have a babysitter for the screen, just put like them watching a TV show on a screen, not a screen that they can kind of bring along with them, a portable screen, because then you can't engage with them. And because then they have too much capacity to over-explore at a time when they are still developing and they don't have the systems in place to be able to stop when they need to. And then over time, you can grow that capacity and I'm not sure that we're going to have time to get into it today about practical things you can do to exercise self-regulation muscles, like everything from musical chairs to Simon Says for younger kids, and for older kids, having freedoms lists where they can put their goals on social media. They can put their goals of what they want to be able to watch, how long they want to be able to watch, who they want to interact with, all of those things. And then as they show you they're responsible and they have the capacity to be responsible, you get to give them more freedom. Those kinds of things are going to be important, but it's just really keeping in mind this is something that different kids are going to be good at different ages. And if they're seeing anything that looks like you're not going to be able to just put parental controls. They're going to have sleepovers. They're going to look at something at sleepovers. To me, that's like a much bigger issue, is that we can think that we're doing this all together, but as kids get older, they have access when we're not around. So they need to have practice at what to do when they've had too much of it. And so if they know that like during mealtime and during certain times it's just off limits, it's much easier. But the specifics of YouTube and TikTok, I'm leaving to Avriel.
Sure.
I think
yeah, I love this idea of building self-regulation skills, because this is the main thing that I do with my child. one thing is, because he's so young, I just straight up don't let him on YouTube at all. It's YouTube Kids or nothing else, or a learning app like Khan Academy Kids or something like that. And the reason is because he can't search anything on YouTube Kids. So he can't go looking for some video and then accidentally stumble across something that he's not supposed to. And two, I can say these are the only channels that he's allowed to watch. So when something is recommended, there are really tight bounds around what is recommended to him. And actually, third, there's no autoplay feature on YouTube. And I think that part is really important for my practice with him and helping him develop self-regulation skills. So I actually will give him the option of how many more videos do you want to watch? And because he knows I'm actually going to let him watch the number of videos, he's only tried to trick me like a couple of times. And if it's unreasonable, I'll say, no, that's unreasonable. But if it's one more video or two more videos, I say, great, thank you for setting that boundary for yourself. And he'll watch the video and it won't autoplay. So he won't get stuck in that loop of thinking that the content just goes on forever and ever and ever. Obviously, that's only practical for younger kids who aren't going to be on a platform like TikTok or aren't going to feel the pressure to be on regular YouTube. But hopefully by scaffolding some of those self-regulation, it is YouTube Kids, excuse me if I'm clarifying, it is YouTube Kids that doesn't have autoplay. But on YouTube and TikTok, there is kind of the ongoing feed of content. And one of the things that I'm hoping will happen in my parenting practice is that by scaffolding the skill of allowing him to choose, okay, one more video feels good. 5 more videos feels like too much, that self-regulation practice will continue when I'm not in the room and he's older and faced with the algorithm continuing to feed content to him.
And just to clarify, between YouTube and YouTube Kids, I think a lot of parents are like, okay, YouTube Kids, like that's easy. And that might be easier to have, as Aliza was saying, a babysitter, right? And I think that, like, let's take the shame out of that because we've all done it, right? It's parenting is hard. Let's just preface that with, right? We all know that. But what are maybe some misconceptions about YouTube Kids? Because I would assume that there's still some algorithmic kind of flow going in there. What is there that maybe parents should also know so it doesn't seem like, oh, then that's just fine, we could just leave the YouTube Kids on?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. No, there's still a recommendation algorithm in YouTube Kids. So if you're watching a video on YouTube Kids, you're still going to get recommended videos of what you should watch next. And they're still going to be based on what the user, the child, has shown to engage with the most in the past. So I can say that I want my kid to be able to watch Club Baboo and Sea Babies and Number Blocks. But if he's only watching Club Baboo, then he's probably not going to get Number Blocks recommended to him very much, even though that might be the thing that I really want him to be watching because I care about numeracy. So I think that's important to understand. One more thing I meant to mention earlier that I do want to bring up really briefly is that, there are these opportunities to build executive functioning skills in interacting with tech, but we can't overlook the opportunities to build technical skills when children are engaging with technology. And so, for all the things that we should be very cautious about and understanding in terms of, TikTok and YouTube and the potential sticky issues that a child could get themselves into without guardrails. There are also incredible tools for learning how to build media, how to tell stories, how to communicate with peers, how to persuade people to take on a position that you have taken on. And so there is the media building kind of storytelling, skill building capacity that comes along with using social media. But then there's also just the hardcore technical skills. I want my child, and I want all the children in my family to feel very comfortable with technology in their lives, so that if they decide in the future that, hey, I actually want to learn how to build software, I want to learn how to build hardware, that they feel empowered to do that, and that they can contribute to these fields that we're all saying have all kinds of problems and issues, that they can contribute to those fields in really positive ways and make it better for the next generation.
I love that you bring that up, because I think we can't keep them away from it, because they're going to be part of the change, right? So I think that's part of the critical thinking and talking through this with them is, what did you see on YouTube or TikTok that maybe was problematic? What do you think needs to be changed so that that's not there, or that shifts, right? And empower them to be that change. I know that one thing that we see as we're doing our YouTube ratings and reviews is we're trying to give parents as much information as possible in these reviews, like how much violence is there, how many products and purchases are pushed. And that's like a huge one, because on normal YouTube, it's driven by ad revenue, right? So there's advertisements just popping up, even if the creator themselves did not choose to have an advertisement in there, right? So we're really helping to start that conversation by saying, here's what's in here, so you don't have to watch all of YouTube, which will leave you on the floor like dead, right? But here's what we know is in here that you may want to like look out for, so you can have those discussions, because we can't always say, no, you can't be here, when they'll find ways around it, right? So how do we have those discussions? But both of you have been so amazing today. I've learned so much today. And I think that what's really helpful for parents and everyone watching would be to just kind of give some final takeaways that they kind of can take and put in their parenting toolbox and use for their training wheels, right? So I would say on the common sense end, what we've really learned is build a generation of critical thinkers, right? That communication is key. I know that's something we do on Common Sense through our articles, through our listicles, giving those lists that we find, this is great content, whether it's YouTube, whether it's different media types, whether it's video games, like we've seen that this is great content. This is where you can kind of guide your kids to, or your family to, and really just giving those guided questions of like, how can we talk about the content that's in all of this media, so it's not as scary, but also so that it's something that kids are thinking of when they are using technology or when they're taking in media. And also just a reminder that we like to say, we can put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? Parenting is an experiment. It really is, right? Nothing is set in stone. So if we find that maybe something we did, or we guided our kids to do or took away from them was not right, then we can reset our decisions around media. And I think that's a great practice to model for our kids, to say, it's okay to reset. You don't have to be, strongholden to who you were yesterday. You can reset and rebuild. So, Avriel, what would be some of your takeaways from today that you'd really want parents to know and be able to practically use in their lives around media and technology?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that we're fostering authentic relationships with our children in real life around technology use, that we're being transparent about our own technology use, that we're modeling for them and explaining how we're modeling for them the choices that we're making around being on our phone. So, the example you gave about your child saying, hey, why don't you get off your phone too? And being like, what, saying explicitly out loud, thank you so much for reminding me that I would like to be present right now with you. And that being on my phone doesn't allow me to be present with you. I think one of the other things is that I would hope people take away from this is that using technology is important for developing some really valuable skills. Even if your child never writes a line of code in their life, they're going to need to know how to navigate even more complex algorithmic systems in the future, because machine learning and artificial intelligence, they're not going anywhere. They're just going to become further and further integrated and embedded in our lives in more complex and complicated ways. And so we have to teach them how to interact with these systems, and continue to teach them as they grow, because it's just an essential life skill to know how to navigate these systems. And I think the final thing that I would suggest is to just both build a like-minded community of like-minded peers, both parent peers, but also kids who whose parents are taking all of these things into consideration, are curious about technology, are curious about the relationship that they want their child to have with devices, and be in community with those people and share what you're learning and where you're struggling.
Thank you. And Aliza, what for you would be some takeaways?
So in addition to building all those underlying skills, I want to go back to relationship, and we know how protective relationships are. And because we know that, really reminding ourselves, take a deep breath right now and know that you're developing a close relationship so that all these challenges that come along are ones that you can sit by your child's side as they grow older and as they're developing, and be present to help them figure it out. And also know that they're going to mess up and you're going to mess up. And that's how we grow. We mess up and stretch ourselves and grow, and to buy into that deeply. And relationships with other kids that are in real life, and making sure that they have things that they do that are also in real life. Communication is going to be super protective, because they're going to crave that, and they're not going to spend all their time just on tech. And also that, this isn't the horrible enemy. And even in relationship building, there are times, particularly when your kids get a little bit older, where that's the only bonding you're going to be able to do. And that's such an important thing to keep, to buy into, to get an acceptance over. It's like watching, when your kids are watching TV, when your teenagers are watching television, and it's something that you have no interest in, or they're playing video games and you're like, I hate video games, and this is my constant battle with my kid. Sit down with them and say, teach me about this, and do something fun with them, so that they don't shut the door and think you just don't even know what's going on. And the other two tiny things I want to say, when you give kids choice, and even when you have younger kids, as Avriel was talking about her 4-year-old, you're helping. There's so much new research out there that choice really helps build executive function skills, because you're being autonomy supportive. And when we have autonomy, we feel more capacity to make better choices. And that is going to be protective in the long term. And lastly, just as a side note, when we talked about threats, I didn't say this, and I just want to make sure that I do. Visual things that you see visually are much scarier and do much more harm than things that you read or listen to. And so when you are making these decisions, and when you're thinking about guardrails, and when you're preparing kids, they do need to know. And this is true for us. We've seen news cycles that have driven us into mental health crises. So it's not healthy. And that is just a side little piece that I want to make sure to discourage, is using these things to learn the news, for example, is just not effective right now. It's for a developing brain, incredibly confusing. When this is from research from a long time ago, but when the Twin Towers fell and younger kids were seeing news of the towers falling, and then it was repeating over and over, they thought it was happening over and over. So you're not only getting this terrifying experience once, but it's happening multiple times. And so that's a total side note. I just felt like I had to say, but when in doubt, I think building these underlying skills and really cultivating relationship, and your kids and you are going to do great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I definitely Agree. Personally, from the don't just shut it out. My son was on video games for a long time. It scared me because I was not in the video game realm, and that was his language for such a long time. And finally, I thought, okay, the one thing I haven't tried is trying this out. I don't want to, but I'm going to for him. And so I said, what's a cool game that we could play together? It was like a Mario Kart game. And I was like, I used to love Mario. And all of a sudden that conversation started happening and there was a bond. And I was like, oh, this new Mario is cool too. So I was speaking his language. And when you speak that language, they're more likely to speak to you, right? Because they don't feel like they're coming up against the wall. So I love that you brought that up. And thank you so much for both of you. I think we have just a couple questions to end this out. One is from an educator, which is really great, great perspective to come from. So for school devices, we've considered removing the YouTube app, but realize that there are ways around guardrails that kids can access it through a browser. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah.
This is a big one, right? That's sneakiness.
There are browser extensions and tools that you can use to just block access to YouTube in general, if that's what you're interested in. I think that's like the brute force approach, but I'm sure Aliza has a more nuanced way to have conversations with students in classrooms around why we may not want to have access to YouTube in a classroom setting. But the thing for me about YouTube is that it actually is a really powerful educational tool that can be harnessed for good. And so I'm not sure I recommend completely blocking it. I think I would recommend building into a curriculum some digital media literacy and having conversations about what's appropriate use of YouTube and what's not appropriate use of YouTube, and engage students in creating their own YouTube videos so they can understand how creators, what motivates creators to put different things in their videos. And there's so much opportunity for learning around that to shut it out completely feels like a lost opportunity.
Aliza, any thoughts?
I think with for education, it's the same thing as parenting. You want to be authoritative and, sensitive to the individual classroom needs of the students and also set guardrails. But if you do it in a collaborative enough way with the leadership of, okay, I've heard you out, I see what you need, and here's where I'm landing, they're much more likely to respect the policy of the classroom. And then the rest is just, we keep trying.
Yeah. And I think that's a great note. I know that on our site, we've curated some lists of great YouTube channels for maybe younger kids, but maybe the age range of up until like 5th grade that are educational and actually really beneficial. So it's not, not all horrible things going on YouTube. It's just really kind of a wild west and trying to figure out and curate the good things, right? But there's a lot of educational content there. I mean, that's how I'm using it now too. Like recipes are amazing on YouTube.
And we have because the classroom is going to have, there are some classrooms that just have 1 or 2 kids that just absolutely aren't capable yet. Their brains are not capable yet of following those particular rules. And so you might have to shift. It's hard when you have a school-wide policy versus a classroom policy, but that is like another conversation for another day.
And one more quick question, and then we'll wrap it up pretty quickly, surrounding phones. What are some good practices around giving kids a phone?
Yeah, so I think there's
bullet points.
Sorry?
Oh, just some simple bullet points that maybe parents could take about, because I know that's a huge hot button topic.
Yeah, there's a growing movement to give children or to give devices to individuals at younger ages, as long as it's kind of like a non-loaded phone or device, which, I love, because there are so many creative things that can be done on a phone that you don't need anything more than just the apps that exist on the phone itself, to be able to take pictures and videos and create art and drawings and things like that. Yeah, the devices don't have to be internet enabled. That can be kind of a gateway, in a good sense. I know gateway is kind of negative connotation, but giving your child a device just so they can understand what is hardware, what is software, what is capable, what can I do on a phone that's different than what I can do with a pen and paper.
And Aliza, do you have any kind of bullet points on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the most important bullet point is a phone is not synonymous with apps and social media. And so we get that all tied up in one, and then it panics everybody. And also, I wouldn't do it by age. I think there's like a lot of movements to say at this age, you'll be ready, but it's really about the individual relationship between the parent and the child and what they feel like they're ready for. And I don't just mean the skills that the kids are ready for, but I mean, what are you ready for? Like if you're busy and you don't have the bandwidth to help support them with their new phone, just say like, I'm not ready for it yet. I understand that this is something that you need in your mind, and I get it, and you can empathize with them and say, and I'm working on figuring out a time when we're both going to be ready for it. So I think if you're not prepared to be part of that process of learning, it's just like another to-do list for you as a parent, a busy parent. And then you can make a freedoms list just regarding phone and an agreement together. And then you have this wonderful opportunity to give more and more room and space for them to get better at having this device that's, going to have a lot of benefits.
Well, Avriel, Aliza, thank you so, so much for coming on and sharing your insights today and your expertise. I know it's been really beneficial for me. I'm taking away some bullet points, and I'll come back to this video and watch. I hope everyone out there watching has learned a lot and feels more empowered and feels like they have more information to go out there and navigate this world. But listen, we're all doing this together. We're all in this together, and we're human. So we'll get through it, right? So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.